She runs. The sound of her own footsteps is all that's left. Behind her, the world burns. Fire devours the houses, screams twist through the wind, and blood paints the earth like an offering to the moon. Elara Voss no longer knows what she's running from. The flames, her fate, or herself. Everything she loved is gone. Her mother, her village, the quiet dreams of a healer who once believed love was a gentle thing. Now there is only night and fear. But fear has a sound and a voice, and that voice calls her name, soft, deliberate, dangerous. Elara. She stops, turns slowly, and sees him. Tall, beautiful, terrifying, golden hair, amber eyes, the kind of beauty that does not belong to this world, and perhaps never did. Marcus Solari, the vampire who destroyed her village, the man who claims he came to save her. And somehow, she believes him, because his voice promises what no god ever dared to offer: survival. "Come with me," he says, reaching out his hand, "or die here alone." Elara should run. She should flee into the mountains and let the wind erase her from the earth. But there is something in that voice, something that slips under her skin like poison, but sounds like comfort. She takes his hand, and in that single breath, her destiny bends before the sun and kneels to the moon. What she doesn't know yet is that the blood pulsing through her veins is the one thing Marcus desires most. Blood born under a total lunar eclipse. Blood that can shatter curses, defy the gods, and grant a vampire the power they've craved since the dawn of their kind, the power to walk beneath the sun. In the days to come, Elara will taste the luxury and the horror of the solar court. She will learn that love can be a gilded cage, that touch can heal or destroy. Every kiss will be a wound, every bite a chain, and every whisper from Marcus will remind her that pleasure and captivity often wear the same voice. But the universe has its way of balancing darkness, because somewhere within that palace of light and lies, someone will see her, not as property, not as prey, but as the woman she truly is. A vampire with violet eyes, named Kael Noctis, a warrior of the Shadow Court, carved in scars and silence. A creature of night who will find in her the only light capable of breaking him and saving him. When their eyes meet, the world will stop being black and white and turn into the exact shade of temptation, the kind of love that begins with a single glance and ends with the ruin of everything safe. He will call her my undoing. She will call him my end. But together, they'll discover that some loves are not meant for day or night. They are born in twilight, that fragile space between light and shadow, where the heart forgets what sin is, and the soul forgets what forgiveness means. Soon, the moon will rise, and with it, the curse of blood. The solar court will fall. The shadow court will awaken, and Elara Voss, the woman born beneath the eclipse, will have to choose to become the salvation of the one who loves her, or the end of everything that still breathes beneath the sun. Because every love story has a price, and the price of loving an immortal is eternity. There was once a village hidden deep within the mountains, where fog slept upon the rooftops, and time itself seemed to move slower. It was called Lunhaven, the last place on earth where people still believed the moon had a will of its own. Among the narrow paths and the scent of pine lived Elara Voss, the healer's daughter. At 23, her hands carried the knowledge of generations, how to soothe fever, still pain, and balance life on the fragile edge between cure and poison. By day, she tended the sick, her touch light as breath, her voice calm as spring water. By night, she read by candlelight, her fingers tracing the margins of old herbal grimoires, searching for secrets her mother never dared to teach. The elders whispered that the moon had marked her. Her eyes gleamed faintly silver in the dark, and plants bloomed longer in her care than in any others. Some said she was blessed, others that she carried the shadow of something ancient. Elara never listened. She simply wanted to know. Why did one herb heal and another kill? Why did certain words make wounds close faster? And why did the heart tremble at the sound of a name? Her world was small, yet her hunger for understanding was vast. Each evening, after the last patient left and the hearth dimmed, Elara climbed the hill behind her cottage. From there, the valley stretched like a sea of dark velvet. The moon would rise slow and pale, and she would whisper to it as if to an old friend. Sometimes, her mother Elara Voss would join her, bringing a shawl to wrap around her shoulders. "It's cold, my moon," Elara would say. Elara always laughed softly. "Why do you call me that?" "Because you were born beneath it, during an eclipse." Eara's voice would tremble on the memory. The sky went black, then silver again, and for a heartbeat, you shone. Elara smiled, shaking her head. "You make it sound like a prophecy." "Maybe it is." Eara's eyes darkened. "Moon blood is rare, daughter. Old. Some say it grants power. Others say it brings ruin. And you, mother? What do you believe?" "I believe power and ruin are the same thing," Elara murmured. "It only depends on who's holding it." Elara didn't understand then, but she would. There was one person who often watched her from afar. Thomas, the blacksmith's son, her betrothed since childhood. He was kind, honest, simple. He loved her with the steady warmth of a fire that never changed. But Elara's heart was a storm he could not tame. "You think too much," he would tease while hammering steel. "And you think too little," she'd reply with a mischievous grin. He would laugh, sometimes, and sometimes he'd frown. Yet every morning he returned, bringing wildflowers or excuses. Elara tried to convince herself that what they had was love, but in the quiet hours, she could feel the emptiness inside her, an ache that had nothing to do with loneliness. It was something deeper, something the moon itself seemed to echo every time it rose. One night, while gathering herbs near the forest's edge, she heard it. A voice carried on the wind, soft, lingering. "Elara." She froze. The air thickened. The trees seemed to lean closer, listening. For a heartbeat, she could have sworn the voice belonged to the night itself. When she told her mother later, Elara went pale. "You heard it?" "Yes. I thought it was just the wind." "It wasn't the wind." Elara clutched her daughter's hands. "If you ever hear it again, you run. Promise me." Elara nodded, but in her heart, she already knew. She would not run, not from that voice. Months passed. The seasons changed. But fate doesn't announce itself. It simply arrives, quietly, like mist before dawn. That night, the moon rose full and unnaturally bright. The dogs howled. The air smelled of metal and rain. Elara worked late, grinding roots for winter medicine. Her mother slept upstairs. Thomas had left earlier, angered that she once again chose her herbs over his company. The first scream came from the east, then another, then silence. Elara ran to the window. Shadows moved between houses, swift, fluid, wrong, and then came the smell, blood. "Elara!" Her mother's voice thundered from below. "They're here." The next few minutes unfolded like a nightmare she'd never wake from. The door shattered, and through the smoke stepped a man who looked like sin dressed in silk. Tall, golden, terrifying. Eyes the color of sunlight trapped in amber, and a smile that promised eternity and ruin in the same breath. "Good evening, Elara Voss." Elara pushed Elara toward the back door. "Run. Who is he?" "One who should not exist beneath the moon." Elara hesitated, until she saw the fear in her mother's eyes. Then she ran. Through the kitchen, the pantry, into the hidden tunnel that led beneath the hill. Behind her came the sounds of breaking glass, splintering wood, and her mother's final scream. When she emerged into the forest, the village was already burning. She stumbled through the dark, smoke filling her lungs. Branches tore at her skin. When she finally collapsed beside a stream, the world was silent but for the sound of her own breathing. Then came the voice again. Not from the forest this time, from right behind her. Impressive. You made it farther than I expected. Elara turned and saw him. The man from the doorway, untouched by soot or flame. His eyes gleamed as though the fire obeyed him. You killed them, she whispered. No, my soldiers did. I was ensuring you escaped. Why? Because you're special, Elara Voss. Your blood, it sings. He smiled faintly, kneeling beside her. Come with me. I can protect you, feed you, give you everything you could ever want. She backed away. And if I refuse? His smile widened, showing a hint of the truth behind it. Two perfect, gleaming fangs. Then you'll die here, and the world will lose something precious. Elara looked back toward the burning valley, toward the ashes of everything she'd ever known, then forward, into the golden eyes of the devil offering salvation. Her hands trembled, her breath caught, and she took his hand. That was the night the healer of Lunhaven died, and the legend of the Moonbearer began. At first, it felt like a dream. Soft sheets, warm food, silence, freedom inside gilded walls. Marcus Solari kept his promise. He gave Elara a room high above the marble courtyards of the Solar Palace, filled with light that never burned him, scented with jasmine and myrrh. He gave her silk dresses, jeweled combs, rare books, and a library whose shelves stretched to the ceiling. He gave her everything, except a way out. When she asked why she couldn't leave the grounds, he smiled, his eyes glowing faintly amber. The world outside is cruel, he said. Here, you're safe. It was a lie, but it was a beautiful one, and for a time, she wanted to believe it. Marcus was not always cruel. Sometimes, he was kind, almost human. He would bring her flowers that never wilted, sing old songs in a language no longer spoken, tell stories of empires lost to dust. He made her laugh, and then he made her forget she had ever laughed for anyone else. But at night, it was different. He would come to her chamber quietly, his steps soundless, his presence a whisper that filled the air before he even entered. He would sit beside her on the bed, fingers brushing her neck, gentle, reverent, like a priest before an altar. And then he would drink. His lips would find the hollow of her throat. His breath would warm her skin before his fangs broke it. The pain was sharp, but fleeting. What followed was worse. Heat, trembling, pleasure that rolled through her body like fire and silk. Her pulse quickened, her breath hitched, her hands clutched the sheets, and always came the guilt. Because when he fed from her, she felt alive, and when he stopped, she hated herself for wanting more. See how I care for you, he would whisper against her skin. You owe me your life, Elara. You'd be dead without me. And sometimes, she believed him. Because the alternative, that he had destroyed her world only to own what remained, was too unbearable to face. Months passed. She learned the rhythm of the palace, the way sunlight poured through enchanted glass, filtered to gold so it wouldn't burn the vampires who ruled there. She met other courtiers, creatures with perfect faces and hollow eyes, who smiled at her the way hunters smile at a wounded deer. But none of them looked at her the way Marcus did. To them, she was a novelty. To him, she was possession. He called her my light. His courtiers called her the pet. At the grand feasts, he made her sit beside him, dressed in white, always white. Purity suits you, he said. She wanted to tell him that white was the color of mourning in her village. But she stayed silent, because silence was survival. One night, after he fed from her, she dared to ask, "What does my blood do to you?" He traced her jaw with his thumb, admiring her as if she were a painting that belonged to him. "It gives me strength." Strength? He smiled faintly. "The sun used to be my enemy. Your blood softens its fury. I can walk beneath dawn's first light for a few moments now. You've given me what no other creature has. A taste of freedom." Elara froze. Freedom. That word. coming from him, felt obscene. "And what does it give me?" she asked softly. He leaned closer, his lips brushing her ear. "Purpose." She turned her face away, hiding the tears, because she was starting to believe him again. By the end of the first year, gratitude had become dependency. She no longer counted the nights he fed from her, twice a week, sometimes more. He never hurt her. That was his cruelty. He made it beautiful. Every bite was a worship, every wound a promise. And still, the part of her that once ran through the forest refused to die. It whispered in her sleep. It reminded her of who she'd been. So she started reading again. The library became her refuge. There were scrolls older than kingdoms, tomes sealed in wax, journals written by trembling human hands. One night, while searching for something to numb her mind, she found a book hidden behind others, a diary, bound in faded red leather. The writing was delicate, feminine. "He says he loves me. But when he drinks, he calls me by another name." Elara's breath caught. Page after page, she read the story of another woman, a human, who had lived in the palace long before her. A woman Marcus had called his light. A woman who had disappeared. The final entry read, "He didn't save me. He chose me. And now I know too much." The ink ended in a streak. Elara closed the book, heart pounding. The walls of her golden cage gleamed brighter that night, and for the first time she realized it wasn't light. It was a reflection of fire. The next evening, Marcus noticed the change in her. "You're quiet," he said, pouring crimson wine into a crystal cup. "I've been reading," he smiled. "You love your books?" "Yes, especially the ones about the women who came before me." The smile froze. For a heartbeat, she saw something raw flash in his eyes, not anger, but fear. Then it vanished. "I told you," he said smoothly, "you are nothing like them." "Then why do I wear white?" He didn't answer. He simply lifted the cup and drank, his lips stained red. That night, Elara dreamed of her mother. "Run," the voice whispered again. "Run before it's too late." But when she woke, she couldn't move. Her body was heavy, her head swimming. Marcus stood at the window, watching the sunrise, real, unfiltered sunlight, touch his hand. He turned to her, smiling faintly. "Your blood is stronger than I imagined." Elara's pulse stuttered. She was killing herself and giving him the world. From that day on, she stopped eating, stopped smiling, stopped pretending. But Marcus noticed everything. He came to her one evening, a dark tenderness in his voice. "Don't fade from me, Elara. I'm already fading." He cupped her face. "You're not my prisoner." She met his eyes, then opened the doors. His silence was her answer. In the second year, her rebellion became quiet and methodical. She learned how to hide vials of her own blood before he could take them. She began memorizing the routes of the guards, the patterns of the stars above the palace roof, the hours when even vampires slept. And then came the night of the Great Gathering, a celebration of the vampire courts held once every decade. Marcus prepared her himself, brushing her hair, choosing her gown. White, of course. "You'll walk beside me tonight," he said. "They will all see what belongs to me." Elara looked into the mirror. Her skin was pale, her eyes silvered. She looked like a ghost dressed for her own funeral. Still, she smiled. Because deep inside, something had finally cracked open, the first seed of defiance. And in the reflection behind her, she saw something she didn't recognize yet. A pair of violet eyes, watching, waiting. The solar palace glittered that night like a dying star. Every hall was draped in gold and crimson, every chandelier a web of light. The vampires of the great houses gathered beneath one roof, creatures carved from centuries, wearing the faces of gods and the hearts of wolves. Elara had never seen so much beauty feel so cold. She walked at Marcus's side, her steps light, her breath measured. Every whisper followed her, every gaze devoured her. The humans that served as attendants bowed low as she passed, eyes empty, collars gleaming at their throats. The other vampires smiled, fangs hidden behind perfect lips, and above it all, Marcus radiated power. He wore the moonlight like armor, his hand resting possessively on her waist. The golden mark of the solar court shone at his collarbone, pulsing faintly with each heartbeat she wished he didn't have. "Smile, my light," he murmured against her ear. "They're all watching," she obeyed. Because in the solar court, beauty was obedience. The music swelled, a slow waltz, haunting and ancient. Couples turned across the floor, their movements elegant and predatory. Elara stood beside Marcus, feeling the ache of 100 eyes on her neck, on the faint scars no jewel could fully hide. And then, she felt it, a gaze unlike any other, not hungry, not cruel, just aware. She turned and froze. Across the ballroom, half shrouded in shadow, stood a man dressed in black, tall, broad-shouldered, with hair as dark as a moonless sky. His eyes, God's, his eyes, were the color of twilight, not the violet of flowers, but of bruises, of dusk, of secrets whispered between worlds. He wasn't looking at her. He was seeing her. Marcus followed her line of sight, and his expression hardened. "Don't," he said quietly. "That man is trouble." "Who is he?" "Kael Noctis," Marcus muttered. "General of the Shadow Court. They call him the Knight's Blade. He's staring. He does that. It's how he hunts." But Marcus was wrong. Kael wasn't hunting. He was remembering. Something about her face, something in her silver eyes, pulled at a memory older than his own immortality. Later, when Marcus left to toast with the other lords, Elara slipped to the edge of the hall, pretending to admire the paintings, but Kael was already there. He moved like smoke, silent and sure. And when he spoke, his voice was low and rough, like thunder beneath velvet. "You're bleeding," he said. Elara startled. Her hand flew to her neck. Marcus had fed earlier, just enough to leave a mark. "I'm fine." "I didn't ask if you were fine," Kael. "I said you're bleeding." There was anger in his tone, but not at her. She took a breath. "You shouldn't talk to me. He'll see. Let him." The defiance in his voice struck her like heat. "No one, ever, defied Marcus." Kael's gaze flicked to her gown. "He made you wear white." "Yes. So everyone can see what he's done to you." His jaw tightened. "How poetic," Elara bristled. "You don't know me." "No," he said softly, stepping closer. "But I know a cage when I see one, even if it's made of gold." Her breath hitched. The scent of him was cool iron and rain. His proximity made the world smaller, quieter, as if everything that wasn't him faded away. "Go back to your master," he murmured. The word master burned between them, and yet she couldn't move. When she finally found her voice, it trembled. "You talk as if you've never been a prisoner." His eyes softened. "I've worn chains you can't see." For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The music blurred, the ballroom vanished, and there was only that fragile thread of silence between them, the kind that feels like the edge of something dangerous. Marcus appeared before she could speak again. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His hand found her waist, too tight, too possessive, and his smile was sharp enough to cut. "General Noctis." Kael inclined his head. "Lord Solari. I'd advise you to stay away from what's mine." Kael's lips curved faintly. "Funny. I wasn't aware humans could be owned." The air turned colder. Every head nearby shifted subtly, the way predators sense blood. "Careful, Noctis," Marcus said, his tone still honeyed. "Your court might tolerate insolence, but mine does not." Kael's eyes never left Elara's. "Neither does mine." And then, before Marcus could reply, Kael bowed. Not to Marcus, but to her. "Enjoy your evening, Miss Voss." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows at the far end of the hall. Elara exhaled shakily, only realizing then that she had been holding her breath. Marcus's fingers dug into her waist. "What did he say to you?" "Nothing," she whispered. He studied her face, then leaned in close. "If he touches you again, I'll tear his heart out." She smiled faintly. You'd have to find it first. Marcus froze. He didn't strike her. He simply smiled. That beautiful, terrifying smile. And whispered, "Perhaps I will." That night, Elara dreamed of violet eyes watching her from the dark. Not with hunger, with recognition. When she woke, she could still feel the echo of his voice, rough and steady, saying her name without saying it at all. And for the first time in 2 years, she didn't feel alone. The night after the ball, the palace was restless. Whispers moved faster than wind. The servants spoke of tension between the courts, of glances too sharp, of words exchanged between Marcus Solari and the infamous general of the Shadow Court. Elara didn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the reflection of the moon on the glass, tracing the faint scars on her neck. Each mark was a memory, each scar a promise she had never made. When dawn came, Marcus was gone, summoned to a council of lords. It was the first time in months she'd been truly alone. So she did something she hadn't done in 2 years. She left her room. The corridors of the palace stretched endlessly, lit by golden sconces that never dimmed. She moved barefoot, silent, her heart hammering with the thrill of danger. There were guards, of course, but they barely noticed her. Marcus's pet was invisible to them. That was their mistake. In a forgotten wing, she found a door left ajar. The air inside was colder, heavier. It smelled of steel, smoke, and rain. And then she saw him, Kael Noctis. He was standing before an open window, the night breeze tangling his dark hair. Without armor, without the weight of the ballroom, he looked almost human, tired, but alive in a way Marcus never was. "I wondered how long it would take you to find me," he said, without turning. Elara froze. "You knew I'd come." He glanced over his shoulder, a ghost of a smile curving his lips. "You don't strike me as the kind of woman who obeys easily." She stepped inside. "And what kind of man are you, General? The kind who's very bad at pretending not to care." The words hung between them, sharp as glass. She should have left. Every instinct screamed it. But instead, she walked closer until the faint moonlight caught the silver of her eyes and the edge of his scars. "I read about you," she said softly. "The Shadow Court's blade, the vampire who fights for mortals." He gave a quiet laugh. "Is that what they say now? I'm impressed. Usually, they just call me a traitor." "Why?" "Because I remember what it was like to have a heartbeat." The way he said it, simple, almost careless, made something ache inside her. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally. "If Marcus finds out, he'll feed. He always feeds." Kael's jaw tightened. "And you let him." "What choice do I have?" "You always have a choice." She shook her head. "No, you just don't understand what happens when you're owned." That word, owned, made him look at her differently. Not with pity, with fury. He stepped forward, close enough that she could see the faint shimmer of his fangs when he spoke. "I don't believe anyone truly owns you, Elara Voss." She met his eyes. "Then you haven't been paying attention." "I've been paying attention," he said, voice low. "Since the moment I saw you." Her breath caught. "Why?" she whispered. Kael's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "Because you looked like someone who was trying very hard to remember who she used to be." Silence fell, but it wasn't empty. It pulsed, heavy with the kind of tension that could destroy empires if given a spark. She turned away first. "If you pity me, don't. I don't need saving. I never said you did. Then what do you want from me?" Kael took a slow breath. "The truth." "About what?" "About what he's doing to you, to your blood." Elara hesitated. "You know about that." "I know Marcus Solari is obsessed with light, and that he would burn the world to feel the sun on his face." Her heart pounded. "He can walk in daylight for a few moments, because of me." Kael's expression darkened. "He's using you." "I know." "Then why stay?" She swallowed. "Because if I leave, he'll hunt me, and he'll kill anyone who helps." His gaze softened. He'd have to kill me first. Elara looked up sharply. You would risk that? For someone you barely know? Kael's lips curved into a half smile. Maybe I know enough. He stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the coolness radiating from him. The stillness of someone who has learned to move like a shadow. You think I'm not afraid of Marcus, he said. I am. But fear isn't enough to make me ignore what's right. What's right? She echoed, almost mocking. His eyes met hers. You. The word was quiet. Dangerous. True. Elara felt her heart stutter, the first real heartbeat she'd felt in years. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Kael's head snapped toward the door. Without thinking, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her into the corner, into the shadows. His hand pressed lightly over her mouth. The guard passed, but neither of them moved. Elara could feel the cold of his palm against her lips, the warmth of his breath near her ear, and beneath it all, that unbearable silence, that closeness that felt like confession. When the guard's footsteps faded, Kael didn't move away. Neither did she. Finally, he whispered, You shouldn't have come here. Maybe I wanted to. He looked down at her, eyes burning violet in the dark. That's what scares me. And then he let go. She left without another word, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Back in her room, she pressed her fingers to her lips, as if to hold on to the ghost of his touch. The palace felt different now. Alive, dangerous, full of things that weren't supposed to happen, and one that already had. That night, when Marcus came to feed, she didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She looked him straight in the eye and whispered, You'll never own my blood completely? Marcus froze, his fangs at her throat. Then he smiled. No, he murmured, but I own your fear. Elara smiled back, slow, cold, certain. Not anymore. From that night forward, Marcus's hold began to crack, and Kael's shadow lingered behind every heartbeat. She didn't know yet that she'd just chosen sides in a war older than the moon itself. All she knew was that for the first time in years, she could feel something alive inside her again, and it felt like his name. Kael. For days, they didn't see each other. Elara pretended nothing had changed. Marcus still fed, still smiled, still spoke her name like a prayer carved from venom. But something in her gaze had shifted, a quiet defiance that made even the air tremble. He noticed, and he hated it. The night it began, the palace was alive with tension, whispers of rebellion, murmurs of the shadow court growing bold again. Marcus was in council with his lords, his temper sharp as a blade. Elara waited until the last echo of his voice vanished down the marble corridor. Then she ran. The tunnels beneath the solar palace were ancient, a labyrinth of secrets built by creatures who feared the dawn. She moved through them with instinct, heart pounding, guided only by the faintest whisper in her chest. Find him. The air changed before she saw him, colder, thicker, pulsing with the faint scent of rain. Kael was waiting. He leaned against a stone pillar, his cloak unfastened, his hair damp as if he'd just walked through a storm that didn't exist. When he saw her, something unreadable passed through his eyes. You shouldn't be here, he said softly. I never should have been anywhere near him, she answered. But I am, and I'm done pretending. Her voice didn't shake. Not once. Kael took a slow breath. Do you know what he'll do if he finds out? Yes. Her gaze didn't waver. He'll kill me. Kael's jaw clenched. He'll try. They stood in silence, the kind that hums with unspoken things. He stepped forward, every movement deliberate, measured, as though fighting himself with each step. I thought if I stayed away, you'd forget, he said. That I'd forget. Her lips parted. Did it work? His eyes burned violet in the dim light. No. For a moment, neither of them breathed. The world narrowed to heartbeats, hers, fast and human, his, slow and ancient. Then she whispered, Show me what it's like to be free. and Kael closed the distance between them. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't sweet. It was inevitable. His hand found the back of her neck, drawing her closer, his breath cool against her lips. When they kissed, it was like two storms colliding, heat and shadow, moonlight and blood. Elara's knees went weak. Kael caught her, his hands steady, grounding her as everything else fell away. He kissed her like he'd been starving for centuries and had finally found something worth dying for. When they broke apart, she was trembling. So was he. "Elara," he murmured, pressing his forehead to hers. "This can't last." "Then let it burn." He smiled faintly, something fragile and pained. "You'll ruin me. You'll save me." Neither of them realized Marcus was already listening. From the shadows beyond the corridor, amber eyes gleamed, sharp, furious, wounded. He'd followed her. Of course he had. Marcus watched as Kael brushed his thumb over the scar on Elara's throat, the mark he had left, and something inside him broke. When he finally stepped into the light, the air turned heavy with power. "Touch her again," he said, his voice low, deadly calm, "and I'll flay the night itself to find your soul." Kael turned, eyes narrowing. "You've already lost it." "Bold words for a shadow who crawls where I allow him." Elara moved between them. "Stop!" Neither listened. Power thrummed, gold and violet colliding in the air like lightning. The walls shook, the torches burned blue. "Run, Elara," Kael growled. She didn't. Marcus's gaze found hers, grief and rage entwined. "You betrayed me." "No," she said. "I survived you." And with that, she did what neither expected. She raised her hand, and the world answered. The air shimmered with silver. Light poured from her skin, pure and violent. The moon, full and high, cast its reflection straight through the palace dome, and for the first time, Elara felt it inside her, alive and ancient. Marcus staggered. "What are you?" "Something you can't control anymore." Her voice echoed with something not quite human. Kael reached for her, shielding her from the blast of heat that followed as the palace's enchantments faltered. The golden sigils on the walls burned, the marble cracked, and every vampire within miles felt it, the pull of the moonblood awakening. "Elara," Kael whispered, "you'll destroy yourself. Then I'll take him with me." Marcus lunged. Kael moved faster. Steel met shadow. Power met blood. The fight was chaos, too fast for human eyes, too bright for mortal comprehension. Elara stood at the center of it, trembling, glowing, every heartbeat tearing the world wider. Then Marcus struck. Kael fell to his knees, blood slick on his chest. "No!" Elara caught him, pulling him close. His blood was dark, shimmering like starlight. Without thinking, she pressed her hand to the wound, and the moonlight inside her moved. It flowed into him, burning silver through his veins. Kael gasped, not in pain but in wonder. "What are you doing?" he breathed. "Sharing it," she said. "My blood, my curse." He tried to pull away. "You'll kill yourself." She smiled faintly, tears in her eyes. "Or I'll finally live." The light consumed them both. When the dust settled, Marcus was gone. The palace burned from within, gold melting into shadow. And where Elara and Kael had stood, two figures rose, one cloaked in silver light, the other in the glow of dawn. For the first time in history, a vampire stood beneath the rising sun and did not burn. Kael looked at her, really looked, and saw the truth. Her eyes glowed like twin moons. Her pulse was steady, but her skin too pale. "Elara?" She smiled. "You said you wanted to know what freedom felt like." He caught her as she swayed, holding her against his chest. "Stay with me." "Always," she whispered, "even if the sun forgets us." And then she closed her eyes, not in death, but in something new. When she woke, hours later, they were standing on a cliff outside the ruins of the solar palace. The wind was cool, the horizon gold. Kael turned to her, awe and fear in his gaze. "You changed everything." Elara took his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "No," she said softly.
"We did, and when the first light of morning touched them both, they didn't hide, because the curse was broken, and the world had begun again. That was the day the courts fell, the day the night learned to love the sun, and the day the world began whispering the name Elara Voss, the Moonbearer who kissed a shadow and turned darkness into dawn. The fire burned for 3 days. The solar palace, once a monument of pride and cruelty, collapsed into a sea of molten gold.
When the flames died, nothing remained but ash and legend. The world above changed. For the first time in centuries, dawn rose without fear. The vampires of the court scattered, blinded by a light that no longer burned but forgave. And somewhere beyond the mountains, far from the ruins of power, 2 souls walked beneath that new sky. Elara and Kael made their home at the edge of a silver lake, where the moon touched the water and the forest grew quiet around them. There were no servants, no chains, no walls, only silence and freedom and the strange, fragile peace that follows great wars. Kael still woke before sunrise every morning, as if expecting pain, but none came. The light touched his skin gently, like a long-forgotten memory. Sometimes, he stood at the window and whispered, "It feels like forgiveness." Elara would smile, because forgiveness was exactly what it was. She no longer hid her power. The moon answered when she called. The tides bent to her will, but she used it not to rule, only to heal. Travelers came from distant lands, seeking the pale woman who could mend both body and soul. They called her the healer of twilight, the woman who carried both day and night in her blood. She never told them the truth, that her gift had been born from love and ruin, from the kiss of a man who was never meant to exist beneath the sun. At dusk, when the world softened between gold and blue, Kael would sit by the lake with her head resting on his shoulder. Sometimes they didn't speak for hours. They didn't need to. One evening, she asked, "Do you ever miss it? The shadow, the power?" Kael smiled faintly. "Shadow is part of me. It always will be. But now it has somewhere to rest." He turned to her. "In you." She laughed quietly. "That sounds like something Marcus would have said." He looked away. "Then I'll say it better. You're not what gives me light, Elara. You're what makes it worth walking through the dark for." She leaned up and kissed him. Soft this time. Not desperate or defiant, just right. The kind of kiss that feels like a promise kept. Seasons passed. The world learned their story in whispers and half-truths. Some said the Moonbearer had killed the Sun Lord and stolen his fire. Others said she'd tamed the vampire general who once led the armies of night. But those who wandered far enough through the forest sometimes saw them. 2 figures walking along the lake's edge when the moon was full. A man of shadow and a woman of light. Hand in hand. Eternal, but not unreachable. On the night of the first eclipse since her birth, Elara woke to a sound. Soft, distant, familiar. The whisper of the moon calling her name. She stepped outside. The air shimmered silver. Kael followed, wrapping a cloak around her shoulders. "The eclipse," he murmured. "It's beautiful," Elara smiled. "It feels like coming home." As the moon darkened and the stars flared bright, she felt the pulse inside her. Not burning, not demanding, but alive. Kael took her hand. "Does it hurt?" "No," she whispered. "It finally feels like balance." The wind carried their reflections across the lake. One shadow, one light, blending perfectly until they were the same. And in that fragile, sacred silence, the curse of centuries ended where it had begun, beneath the watch of a moon that loved too much, and a sun that finally learned how to forgive. They say, in the centuries that followed, no court rose to replace the solar or the shadow. Only one legend remained, of a love that rebuilt the world, not through power, but through mercy, of a woman who bore the moon in her blood, and the vampire who learned to walk beside her in the day. And if you ever find yourself at the edge of that silver lake, when the wind grows still and the light bends between gold and gray, You might hear laughter, soft, unearthly, familiar. Look closely. You'll see two silhouettes in the distance, one dark, one bright. And if you listen hard enough, you'll hear her voice say, "Come, my shadow," and his, answering, "Always, my light."